All right, I am still off stage. Got to figure out how to adjust. Here we go. Fun. Cool. Wow, that's super cool. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another webinar. We have a good one today. It's all about influencer partnerships. I was just telling Bree and Vin, I just did a session this morning with Morgan Ingram that was all about influencer partnerships as well around events. So I feel like today's been a fun influencer marketing day, but we're going to be doing a really great session. We're going to cover three things: how to create influencer partnerships that drive growth, how to choose influencers for revenue impact, maybe not so lead, and real campaign insights. So if you're listening, feel free to drop in the chat where you're tuning in from. Again, if you have any questions throughout this entire thing, feel free to interrupt us. We'll kind of intertwine them throughout everything. I will be your host today. For those that don't know me, I'm Nick Bennett, one of the co-founders over at TACK, and also have a book coming out on December 31st that's all about influencer marketing. Gives you the guide. I know, I have one going to Vin. Bree, I don't know if you've gotten yours yet, Bree. Like, you were on like the early list, and I some people that were on that list did start to get it. So two people that I look up to, two people that I've known for a while that are doing amazing things in the space. I won't steal their thunder. I'll let them both introduce themselves. But this is today's expert. So, Bree, why don't you introduce yourself first, and then we'll go over to Vin.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm Brianna. I'm the founder and CEO of Verbatim. We are like a hybrid between a full service and boutique marketing agency, but one of our core specialties is influencer marketing, both B2B and B2C. My background is actually in e-commerce originally. I also host a podcast called Stop the Scroll, which is all about influencer marketing. And I occasionally write a newsletter that dabbles in influencer marketing as well.
Nice. Well, pumped to have you. Vin, how about you?
Yeah, my name is Vin Metano, founder of a B2B influencer marketing agency called Creator Buzz. And I'm also a content creator, so I think I can potentially share some perspective from the creator side as well as the brand side today.
Love that. Well, excited to have you both. And honestly, Vin, like I reference your video content so much because as someone that's trying to do more video, and my biggest issue is the editing piece of it. And I'm just curious before we even get into this, like, are you self-taught on all the editing that you do, or do you lean on other people?
I probably edit like 90% of all my videos. I took we had in my high school and like elementary school, we had like video production class. Like I remember we started taking it when we were probably in like the 7th grade, and then we took it all through high school.
That's crazy, man. Well, yeah. You both do fantastic work. So excited to dive in today. Session's probably going to be about 30 minutes or so. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat. This is our first event that we're doing on Wistia, so I'm still trying to figure out where some of the things are. So if you see me, fumbling around, that's probably why. But again, we're going to be kind of going over the agenda here. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is how to build influencer partnerships that drive growth. We're almost at 2025, which blows my mind. I feel like this last back half of the year has absolutely flown. And I'm sure you're already in your planning for 2025 if you haven't already completed that. So if you aren't leveraging influencers and creators as part of that strategy, listen to this because you're missing out big time. Second thing is, how do you evaluate influencer partnerships for both awareness and revenue impact? Because those are two different things. And Bree and Vin are both going to break down that piece of it. And then the last thing is, how do we leverage real campaigns for success? The good, the bad, and the lessons learned. Because I do still feel like there is so much miseducation in the B2B world that, luckily we have people like Vin and Bree and a lot of others that are leading the way, that are sharing a lot of these, successes as well as, lessons learned along the way. And then again, Q&A. But if you do have a question for either, any of us, feel free to drop it in the chat. We'll infuse it throughout the conversation. We want to make this conversational. You could have spent your time anywhere, but you've spent it with us, and we are eternally grateful for that. So let's kick things off. So choosing the right influencers. Now, this is obviously not as easy as it could be. And I think one of the things, to set the stage, so often influencer marketing is, I would say, misunderstood to a certain degree because people think it's just a LinkedIn post. And unfortunately, I feel like you can go so much deeper than that. And Bree, to kind of, throw things over to you first, how do you recommend brands start defining their goals for influencer partnerships? Like, what does that look like? Because I've had those conversations. Vin, I'm sure you've had those conversations, and a lot of people don't even know where to start. So let's help them out.
Yeah, so typically I like to ask some variation of a question around, like, if you zoom out and fast forward, I don't know, a quarter, a year, you look back on your influencer marketing program or campaigns, what's been really successful? Like, what would make you keep going? And what I've noticed is when you ask that after asking what are your goals, the answers do not always align. But the answer you get to that second question, like what does success look like a year from now, will actually give them a lot more clarity into what they're actually looking to accomplish. For example, I have a client who, when we first started working together, they said, we just want brand awareness. We just want exposure, which is valid. Like, that is something influencer marketing is great for. But when we zoomed out and looked at the year as a whole, no, they wanted to drive trial signups, not even paid like conversions. They wanted to drive trial signups. They wanted to increase their market share. And so there were other goals that we could really like pull out from that. And then that informs the kinds of influencers that you'll then begin to work with.
Love that. Vin, what about you? Anything that you've seen different?
Yeah, I would say just when we think about like B2B influencer marketing, like the biggest difference is obviously the niches are so important. I think when you think about like consumer influencer marketing, a technology brand that is a consumer technology brand can partner with like a very broad creator that maybe just talks broadly about business, right? Whereas in B2B, like we need to go very, very deep. Like maybe we don't just want to promote or work with marketers, but like maybe we want to work with like marketing operations folks, right? And that's like a really, really specific niche that is like honestly almost as important in B2B compared to B2C. So that's something that we have to dive into is like, who's your ICP, who's your audience, and that'll determine who we're selecting for the influencer list.
Yeah, I agree.
Go ahead. I feel like that could depend on the brand and the industry though, because like even in B2B, your consumers don't live like in a silo or in a bubble. They still engage with other creators. Like there's still people that they look up to or listen to. And that's one thing that I found really interesting through customer research or consumer research is, okay, I'm marketing to accountants. So yes, like the first thought is I want to work with accounting creators, but maybe they're also listening to podcasts that don't align with finance or subscribe to newsletters that don't align to business. So I think it's cool to kind of venture out and see just what else your audience is actually engaging with.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's I'd be curious on your thoughts on, I feel like people on LinkedIn have this debate all the time. Like, do you have to niche down or not? Like, you take someone like Darren McKee, for example. He's a big believer of just, being broad, talking about whatever he wants. Now, would you both, Vin, I'll throw it over to you first. Like, would you recommend when you're creating content to go broad in today's world? Because again, AI has unfortunately caused everyone to become a creator. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I think it's depending on how you use it. But like, do you think you need to niche down in today's world to be a creator and possibly influencer, or can you go broad?
It depends, right? I think like there's creators that have done both options and had success. In my personal experience, I think it's more beneficial to start in a niche and then become more broad. Because if you're just starting off way too broad, the algorithm and timelines don't know really where to place your content in front of the right audience. And then your audience also doesn't know what to expect from your content. I think one of the biggest things is you need like familiarity. So if someone follows you, like they need to know whenever I follow Nick, like he's going to talk about X, Y, or Z. And occasionally he might talk about this random thing, but that's like I said, occasionally. So start niche and then go broad is in my experience, but I'm sure other people have maybe different experiences.
Yeah. Bree, what about you?
I definitely agree with part of what Vin's saying. I mean, it does depend on the creator. And I think a few things, their personality, what interests them, like what they do for work, what they want to talk about. But I also think it depends on the platform. Because there are B2B creators on TikTok, for example. And the way TikTok's algorithm works is it's not trying to tell a story, right? So I don't follow creators because I'm looking for one type of content, because you don't know what you're going to see next when you scroll, versus LinkedIn, where yes, like I would follow Nick or I would follow Morgan Ingram or whoever really because I want to learn about this or talk to them about this or engage with this type of content. So I definitely think it's platform specific. I will say, as somebody who like adamantly refuses to niche down, I see value in both approaches. It really just does depend on the creator. And I think our definition of niche, I think that definition's also shifted a bit. Like you can niche, your niche can be certain types of content or content pillars. It doesn't have to be everything. So I don't know. I think it's just a nuanced conversation, but I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like when I started 5 years ago on LinkedIn, like all I talked about was field marketing, event marketing, and like that's what I was known for because no one else was talking about it. And at the time, I think it was like 650 million users on LinkedIn, and again, like 1% created content. So if I could create and stand out around field marketing, the misconceptions to a revenue organization, what that was, I started going on podcasts, and like that was all people wanted to talk to me about was field marketing, event marketing, stuff like that. Now, as I grew over the years, like I got into ABM, I did ABM roles at companies, I did customer marketing, moved into like an evangelist type of role, and now have kind of started my own business with Mark, you know, almost 2 years ago now. And I feel like, you know, I still talk about like marketing in general and the creator economy and stuff like that. But I feel like once you put in the work and the consistency of doing this for so long that people end up following you for you, like, you know, take a person like Justin Welsh, for example, like he could say the sky is blue. There's going to be probably like 3,000 people that like that, even knowing it adds no value. But people that have shown up, and, you know, you both are great examples of this, people that have shown up for so long and have put in the work, you know, they're following you for you because they follow along. They love that aspect. And that's why I bring a lot of my personal life into it as well, because people get to know you. And like, I have people that will DM me all the time, be like, hey, you know, how old are the babies now? I feel like, you know, they were just born and like, they're about to be 2 in a couple of months. And I literally talked to someone yesterday that was like following me right when they were born. And they were like, I remember when they were in the NICU, and like, it's crazy like that they're almost 2 years old, and I've still been following your content throughout that whole journey. So it's just really cool to see, I think.
Yeah, that is really cool. That's awesome.
Cool. So let's see. Before I jump into this, I have a few more questions. So, you know, Bree, when you think about the factors that companies should consider when you align an influencer with their brand values and audience, like what are those factors? Because I feel like sometimes companies don't know this, and I'm curious, and, you know, Vin, this will be your question as well. Like, I'm curious how you guide them to that, like what goes into that whole piece of aligning the influencers with their brand values.
Yeah. So first is platform. I think a lot of brands just assume that B2B influencer marketing is just LinkedIn. It's not. I have many clients who are also doing influencer marketing activations on YouTube, TikTok, even Instagram. So where do your audiences hang out? Like, what is their water cooler? It probably is LinkedIn to some extent, but is that the greatest extent? And I think depending on budget, like where should we allocate those resources? So platform first, content, whether they niche down or not, like, are they creating content that aligns with the quality your brand is looking for, the like values that your brand upholds? Are they consistently posting? And then from there, I would go into audience. So there are different levels, right? Are you looking to speak to the decision makers, to the champions, to the evangelists? Like, understand who you want to speak to, and then back into the influencers and start looking at their audience demographics. Little bonus one is look at their engagement. So that's still huge. Like, regardless of follower count, AI is running rampant, to your point. AI bots, engagement pods. So making sure that that's also aligned with your brand. Like, you don't want a bunch of irrelevant traffic. You don't want a bunch of, you know, like manufactured engagement. So making sure that they're actually creating authentic content is really crucial.
Love that. Vin, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I would just add to that too. I think on LinkedIn, it's specifically on LinkedIn, I think it's tricky because folks like sales, marketing, HR, they typically have a lot of followers because when you're adding people or connecting with them, it'll add them as a follower. And a lot of creators, I think, will judge, and brands, like a successful creator based on their follower count. When in reality, the engagement typically doesn't match that. So to what Brianna said is actually going through to see if there's like genuine conversations happening within the comments. Impressions are great too if it's, you know, brand awareness, but, you know, that shouldn't be the end all be all. I just don't think I think too many brands and creators are relying too heavily on that follower count number.
Yeah, it's interesting because my follower count isn't that huge, but like I've always focused on the engagement piece of it. And when I talk to brands that will reach out, they're like, hey, you don't have as many followers as XYZ person. And I'm just like, well, like I'm not trying to be that. And I got caught up in this mindset early where I was always trying to be like the Chris Walker or the Dave Gerhardt. Like I was like, all right, well, if my content doesn't perform as well as their content, then I must not be like that good. And like, that's a terrible mindset to have. First off, you can spiral really, really quickly, which has happened multiple times. But now I don't compare myself to anyone because I don't want to get caught up in that mindset. And when I talk to brands that try to compare me to other people in the way that they like price, I'm just like, listen, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. It's my POV. Like, if you're not okay with that and like you need to compare me to someone else to get the authority for this, like maybe we aren't the right partners to work together. So
yeah, and to Vince's point too, like engagement is the most crucial part. I mean, I have a sizable audience on LinkedIn, and if a sponsored post doesn't perform well in terms of impressions, but they drive an insane amount of leads from that post, that's just as successful. And I think that's one area where brands need a bit more education. In my opinion, it's mainly because like the leadership team does still look at a follower count and be like, oh, that's great. We want this like macro influencer, this mega influencer to promote it. It's like, yeah, but there's a balance. So
100%, which brings us to that next piece, micro versus macro. I think it's so interesting because I think when I think of like the people that have over 100,000 followers on LinkedIn, so I feel like some of those people, not all of them, and I don't want to like speak for everyone, but I feel like some of those people with bigger follower counts, like they don't reply to the comments. And I get it, when you're getting hundreds of comments, it's hard to reply to every single one. But for me, that was always really important that I reply to every single comment. Even if I don't get to it that day, I get to it a couple of days later. And I've had a lot of people thank me for that because there'll be people who are like, hey, I commented on this big person's, their profile. I did it every single day and they didn't reply to me once. I feel like you start to tune out those people. And you might still, think that they're, they put out great content, they're well respected, all of that stuff. But why am I going to waste my time putting valuable comments together if they're not going to reply to me? And I feel like the whole micro kind of influencer debate is, I would much rather personally work with those people that have, 10,000 followers to 50,000 followers, because they have a lot of engaged audience that, and they're not in it for just the money. They're in it because they truly enjoy it. I feel like there's something important about that. And Bree, I'm curious on your thoughts on like that whole, micro versus macro debate and like what you've seen and if you've seen similar stuff and how you view it.
Yeah. So I think I have like 230 right now. And I hear this debate often. I think the problem with the debate is that it's an oversimplification and a generalization of a lot of unique personalities. And it's also platform specific. I think, so for me, for example, I can physically not reply to every comment. Like if I'm getting 300, 400 comments on a post, I have a job. Like, I'm still trying to build a business. And I think that's one of the things I find fascinating about social media in general, is that people believe they're kind of like owed this level of engagement because they're engaging. And to an extent, yes, like it's about building community and that's important. But I also think like I've fallen into that trap a bit too. Like, oh, well, they didn't respond to my comment. They haven't for the last 3 posts. Yeah. But it's like, yeah, but they also don't owe me anything. And I'm not doing this just to get a reply. So I think there's a balance there for sure. And I was actually talking to somebody the other day who said something similar about micro influencers. Like they're not in it for the money. Like they're more engaged. I see many micro influencers who don't respond to any comments. So I just think there are micro influencers who do. There are macro influencers who respond to every comment. There are micro influencers who don't respond to any of them. And there are macro influencers who post and ghost. Like I think it's about more than how many followers they have and just more about their approach to community building and community engagement. I care just as much about engagement as I did when I had 5,000 followers. It's not my fault that I grew quickly. you know? And so I think there's a balance to the way we approach social. And as it relates to brands, I think there's a balance to how they value follower counts. It's not everything. It does matter, like to some extent, but it's definitely not everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Vin, what about you? Like how do you think companies should weigh the pros and cons of working with like micro versus macro influencers?
Well, I always kind of recommend like kind of blended approach, right? If you're working with a smaller group of macro creators, you can basically how I would structure it. Obviously, the macro creators are going to be a lot more expensive versus the micro creators. And so some of the blended approach you can take is working with a smaller number of macro creators, whether it's 1, 2, depending on your budget, maybe 3, because they can get quite expensive. And then mixing in more of these really micro, even nano creators, depending on your segment or industry. We work with some like really niche brands, like in like, let's say revenue operations, and there's just like not that many creators to begin with. But in that community, like those are the people. And so your dollars can go a lot further within certain communities, depending on the product that you are promoting, right? If it's more of a broad like marketing product, obviously that's maybe different. Maybe macro creators would be really, really great to work with. But if it's like super ultra niche, maybe you have, maybe you're tipping the scale more in favor of the micro creators versus the macro.
Love that. Great breakdown for sure.
I think what's fun about that too is that you can kind of tell 2 stories at once, like especially from if you're working with a brand who's like, okay, well, our 2 main goals are brand awareness and lead gen, or like and trial demos or whatever, like trial signups. Those macro creators, you could lean into the brand awareness piece more and then still focus on, less impressions but more niche like audience targeting with the nano or micro creators. And so I think it's really fun to play around with both.
Yeah,
I would say it's like my favorite type of campaign.
Yeah, I agree with you for sure. Let's talk about opportunities in B2B influencer marketing. Now, I think there's a lot of different things here. It's funny, Morgan and I, when we spoke at the event earlier today, like I think there's starting to be a shift, but there's still so many brands that think like, oh, it's just LinkedIn or just YouTube or just IG or whatever it is, TikTok. Like it's just, hey, go post a video, go do a LinkedIn post. But so often, and I've done a lot of research on this because when I was writing the book, like I had to figure out like, hey, like there's a better way to be doing this. And the amount of companies, I forget the number off the top of my head, but the amount of companies that would say like, hey, I'm going to work with these, 20 creators on a LinkedIn brand awareness campaign. So many companies don't do anything with that content after. So they get a lightning strike for say, a day and a half, LinkedIn, content shelf life is short anyways. They just don't do anything with it. And I think the way that more companies should approach it is exactly like this. It's integrating a lot of these different tactics into channels and part of your go-to-market strategy. Like so often, marketers, when they're doing stuff, it's unfortunately siloed. Like, events isn't talking to the content people and your, marketing ops person isn't talking to, so-and-so. And it's like, you could tie influencers and creators into this and make it part of your integrated strategy. So you have a big rock, or maybe it's like your first half thing, second half thing. And you're doing all of these things. And Morgan brought up a good point earlier where he said in 2025, he's cutting out 70% of his brand deals. And he's only focusing on a few and is going a lot deeper, which is basically speaking to this slide right here. And Vin, I'm curious on what you're seeing in the market today. And then Brianna, same thing for you, but like, are you seeing more creators cut down on that transactional, sponsored content and doing deeper types of partnerships?
1,000%. Yeah. I think a lot of creators too want to be cautious of not like flooding their feed with too many sponsored pieces of content. And so like, I know some creators that are saying, hey, I only want to work with 4 partners this year. So if they're doing if they're doing once a month for each of those brands, they're doing like 1 sponsored piece of content per week, per se, for example. And so, yeah, I think it's beneficial for both the creator and the brand to be more selective with those, because one, for the brand, now you have people that are actually like representing the brand, and you could tell it's not just like a paid partnership or a sponsored post. And then from the creator side of the house too, it allows them, like you said, to go a lot deeper with the product and actually like understand the use cases.
Yeah, I love that. Bree, what about you?
I feel like I'm just bringing like so many spicy takes, but First and foremost, I just empathize with the marketers who are given like a $10 budget and have to build an influencer program. It's hard. It's really hard, whether you're in B2B, B2C, a mix of both. Influencer marketing is a lot more validated and proven out in B2C. It's just a fact. And in B2B, it's an uphill battle, I believe, for a lot of marketers to get approval in the first place and then budget on top of it to even test it. Then when they're building this program or the campaign, they're getting like daily calls from their manager asking what the results are, but they've had like one sponsored post go out. I empathize with the struggle and the hustle of building like a campaign or a program or an activation. And I think that's the nuance of B2B influencer marketing is we are still reeling from slashed budgets and slashed headcount. Like not every marketer has the bandwidth to build out a program or activation like this, like that's super integrated with other departments, especially if they're also the event marketer and like also the personal branding strategist or fill in the blank. And I think what's interesting too is as we see this rise in B2B influencer marketing and in more B2B creators popping up, they're starting to learn how to negotiate. And a lot of them are saying, yeah, like I'll post for you or I'll go to this event for you. But if you also want to use the content later, like this is the additional fee. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's an interesting balance between understanding that there's a lot more value in building out like a full-fledged integrated marketing program that allows you to work with creators in multiple ways, and also realizing that your budget just might not allow for it. Your leadership team might not be on board with it. They might not see the value. Like I speak to so many C-suite execs who are like, yeah, like my team's been bringing up influencer marketing. I don't know why they want to partner with Kim Kardashian. And it's like this idea of what influencer marketing is so different from what it actually has become. And so I just think all that to say it's ideally, yes, like you are integrating your creators into multiple aspects of your marketing programs and strategy. If that is not where you're at financially or in terms of like proving out the ROI, I understand why marketers start with sponsored posts or with co-creating content or with affiliate links. And I think keeping in mind, okay, this is what I can start with. Here's what I'm trying to prove out for my leadership team. Here's where I want to get to and the kind of program I want to build out. Like here are the steps I'm going to take to get there. That's where you'll see success even along the way, like as you scale.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. It's funny. We have a client of ours and like, I was doing a bunch of research because they're looking to plan their 2025 events and like they want to make like big splashes. They're like our executive team wants to like spend some money. And so like I was looking up like the Ryder Cup, like the Masters, the Super Bowl, the NBA All-Star game. And like I put together some packages for them. And like it ranged from like $300,000 up to $1 million. And I was like, like if you built in like an influencer program and like did a lot of these things integrating into your strategy, like you could cut this cost way down. And it's just so interesting because it's still like, they're like, well, our CEO said we have to do it this way. And a lot of marketers don't want to push back, or maybe they feel like, unfortunately, it's like in this economy, you don't want to push back to a certain degree because it's like, hey, you could just lose your job and be back out on the market. And it's not a fun market to find a job in right now. So it's interesting for sure.
But I agree, especially with what Vin is saying. Like I'm hearing that too from creators. I don't want to be a billboard. Like I don't want to be posting for a different company every day or every week. But I also don't want to be making $2 from a post. So I have to do more of them to actually like see the ROI as a creator. And so I'm curious. I think it's like a chicken and the egg situation, in my opinion. Like, are more brands going to start embracing this, getting budgets back, and then putting more spend behind this in 2025? Or influencers going to continue to push back, and that's going to be the catalyst for more brands being open to it?
I think one of the things I'll just add to that too is like in B2B, one of the things that you have to consider is in B2C, I think there's more full-time creators for sure. And in B2B, a lot of the creators that at least our agency works with either have full-time jobs or have their own businesses. And so the sponsored content for them is not like a main driver of their revenue. So they're not really prioritizing it as much as a full-time creator would do. And so that's why also they're being like super selective with their partnerships. And then also, Brianna mentioned like the negotiation piece, like they want to make sure that their time, it's worth their time basically. If they already have a 9-to-5, if they have a business they're working on, like they don't want to spend too much time like creating video content if it's not worth the squeeze basically. So that's like the one challenge that we've experienced with our side of the business.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
Makes sense for sure. I know we kind of, we're at the 30-minute mark. I have one last piece that I want to dive into here. Let me just double check. There's a couple more slides. I'll go, nobody wants to hear from your brand. Obviously, we know, people buy from people. It's the whole reason Mark and I created, the people first go to market mindset, the principal system around it. Obviously, leveraging influencers for content distribution it's huge. I think we're still in the early adopter phase. I think, at least in tech, we're going to start to see hopefully mass adoption over the next couple of years, but we'll see. But I want to dive into, real campaign insights, things that you both have personally experienced. And Bree, I'll start with you. Can you walk us through a campaign? Because everyone talks about, all the successes out there, but is there any campaigns where things didn't go as planned, and maybe some lessons that you took from it that could help other marketers?
Well, if any potential clients are listening, no, I've never had an unsuccessful campaign. Like, everything I do is gold. What do you mean? But no, I've had many that have not gone well. We've learned from them. I would say a recent one, they're still a client, so I won't name the company. But when we first started out, we've essentially scaled with them. So when we first started out, they'd never done influencer marketing on LinkedIn before, only on YouTube and one other channel. And they were hesitant. They're like, we want to test this out. Our CMO thinks it could be great. Like, this is how much we can dedicate each month. And we want to work with different influencers each month. Like, they want to do one post per influencer per campaign. And I pushed back quite a bit, but at the same time, if it's what your client wants and they're not budging, you kind of just got to do it. So I was like, okay, what about this? We'll try it for a month, maybe 2, sit back, look at the results and see what happens. Did not go well, I think, for reasons that both of us, all 3 of us, can understand. What we saw was, for brand awareness, great impressions, great return on that, but that wasn't their main goal. They were looking for trial signups in this case, and like staggeringly low results from really, really good creators on LinkedIn. And so when we took that data, it kind of proved my point, but it's the point that I think a lot of brands need to validate for themselves. LinkedIn is just a different platform in the sense that, well, with any platform really, but especially LinkedIn, you need to do more than one post. You need to find a way to integrate it into your content creators' like natural flow and calendar if you want it to make sense to their audience. And so we were able to kind of zoom out and think more holistically about the campaigns. It's not just about one post. How can we reallocate these funds? Maybe we're working with less creators, but we're able to do multiple posts or have them collaborate together or set up a webinar with a couple of them and like invite their audiences to it. So we kind of scratched the whole LinkedIn program and restarted it and rebuilt it. And the results have been a lot better.
Nice. Love that. Vin, what about you? Anything that you've seen? I know, you've been doing it for a little bit as well. Like, is there anything that you've maybe, I love that you like post your videos of like the transparency of like, your breakdown of your expenses, your net profit, like keep up those videos. Cause like, for me, it's very fascinating. I know some people don't like talking about like money that they make and stuff like that, but I love the transparency. But yeah, just curious, same question for you.
Yeah, thank you. I would say the second client that I ever signed, I think we just didn't get the audience right, and I think they were still also figuring out messaging. And at the time, like we both sides decided like this was the right audience we want to go after, and so we did like a 3-month campaign. And towards the end of it, like we got some good, I would say maybe engagement or impressions. But the goal for this particular campaign was to drive users for this particular product. It was a PLG type of product, so they really were focused on driving users. And it just didn't do that. And I think like we went back to the drawing board and we're like, okay, we tried this audience, like people are engaging, but they're not taking action. So how can we get them to take action? And I think one of the things that we did was an exercise where we actually started to identify like, okay, let's look through your customers and like who's actually using your product? Like what's the actual persona? We found it was completely different from the one that we were trying to target at least. And so that was just a learning lesson. I think that's one of the most important things, is identifying like who your audience is, specifically in B2B.
Love that. It's a big one for sure. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat. I think, let me just double check. We have this. We have a couple more. Sorry, I'm so behind on the slides. Call Cloud example and Vin, are these yours or is this Brianna?
Yeah, I saw like some of the notes. You wanted some examples of stuff, so I just threw it. I think if you go back like one slide, I think like the challenge in B2B is that we're often promoting like non-tangible products. Like it's software, it's depending on what you're selling, sometimes it's not sexy. And so like one of the things that I really liked, and maybe people on this call probably saw this online, but a company called Hootsuite who does like social media management, they put out these big annual reports every year. It's very common, as you know, Nick, in B2B to put out these big annual reports. Like companies spend 4 months at least putting together these reports. There's data in them. Then they want people to like market them and actually download them. And so that could be the biggest challenge. And I often say that like in B2B, whenever they're putting out this type of content, it's typically not a value problem. It's more of a distribution problem. And so Hootsuite did a really cool campaign where they just used influencers and they turned their product into like a physical product to actually promote that report. And they said, their CEO said that 66% of all their downloads came from this campaign and it generated $1 million in pipeline. And the report itself probably was great regardless. Like even if they didn't do this campaign, it's probably a really great report. They just needed additional distribution to help people download that. Right?
Love that.
Yeah, that was an awesome campaign.
Yeah, great example. All right, I want to respect everyone's time, especially you two. One final question. I'll go through these real quick. All right, that's that piece.
There are some questions in the chat, by the way.
Oh, are there?
I don't know if you saw that.
See, I always get confused. There's the Q&A. It throws me off. All right, cool. Let's do this. What does this do? What's add to stage? I don't know what add to stage does. Oh, here we go. Oh, fun.
That's cool.
All right. So Katie, Share Your Genius. What's up, Katie? They produce my podcast. Big fans of Share Your Genius. But for LinkedIn campaigns, have you all seen any decrease in impact with the new-ish LinkedIn label for sponsored content? I don't know who wants to handle that first, but I am curious as well. So
I don't see that. No, I don't see it. I think a lot of creators are like really hesitant to put that brand partnership label on. And I think a lot of creators also are scared to put links in the post as well. I think that tanks performance. In my experience, if the post is really well, like sometimes I've had posts that have like 2 or 3 links in the post and the post still performs well. So I think if the elements of the content is great, then I don't think it should like deter any sort of performance, in my opinion.
Bree, what about you?
I feel like Vin's so much nicer than me because the way it was coming out in my head was, well, if your content's good, like you're not seeing like a decrease in impact. So I completely agree with Vin. Like I think there's a good chunk of sponsored content on LinkedIn that just isn't very engaging lately. And so timing that with, the arrival of this like newish label, you could say it's connected, but I don't think it is. I think it's fine. You need to use it if you're a content creator, if you want to adhere to LinkedIn's advertising policies, and it's not really harming my reach at all.
Cool. Great question. Let's see. Is this one right here from Lauren from the B2B brand side? Which metrics do you think is the most important metric to track if you're just getting started? How should we prove buy-in when brand awareness is hard to measure? Bree, I'll start with you.
So for the first one, which metrics should you track? I would look first at what the business goals are for the year or the quarter, really, and then try and align them with those. And it also depends on the stage of the company. I'm curious what you two think, but like there are a couple companies that I've worked with where brand awareness was more of the play, but they were also a lot more established. So you can kind of put more spend towards that. Earlier stage companies, you also want to have exposure, but the budget might not allow. So align it with your business goals. I think brand awareness can be a good one. Conversions, but that's tough, especially if you only have the budget for like a sponsored post or 2. Then any sort of metrics related to pipeline generation, I think is huge for B2B. For proving buy-in, I would, if you're trying to measure brand awareness, having up-to-date accurate analytics from the creators that you work with is going to be crucial. So getting them to send their 7-day and 30-day analytics, maybe even their 60-day, to see how it's performing. I would give them unique URLs so you can track that as well. And then if you can, invest in a social listening tool to see how that's impacting it, especially if you're doing like certain campaigns at certain times. You can kind of back into the data there.
Love that. Vin, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with everything Brianna said. I think like in B2B, again, I just keep having to preface like you got to make that distinction in B2B, right? There's traditionally two kind of go-to-markets. You have a PLG go-to-market, or you have maybe a sales-led go-to-market. Those are going to be vastly different in the way in which you market those with influencers. And so if you have a PLG go-to-market, you're obviously focused on driving users, which, to Brianna's point, you have to have a budget that allows for that particular campaign. Whereas if you have a sales-led motion, nobody can sign up for your tool. You can't buy it. You can't put your credit card in. It'll take 6 months to buy the tool. You have to talk to procurement, sales. You have to go through the whole sales process. So maybe we're less interested in actually driving demo requests or things like that, because that will take a pretty long time. And maybe we're more focused more on the brand awareness piece or helping with content distribution, one of the two. So that's all I have to add to that. Oh, and then the second part of the question is prove buy-in when brand awareness is hard to measure. I think Bree knocked that one out. So I agree.
Sweet. Cool. Let's see. Is there any other questions? Love both your answers. Awesome. I think those are the big questions. I have one other side. Go join TACK Insider as well. It's free. Subscribe. You could do all of that. Bree, Vin, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people go to learn more about you? And for anyone that's listening on demand, I'll drop the links as well. But both of you, please plug whatever you want to plug. We want to make sure to support you because, again, you spend time with us, and I'm eternally grateful for that. So thank you.
Yeah, this was great. You can find me on LinkedIn, Brianna Doe. I'm like always posting on there. It's like all I do. So LinkedIn would be great. Agency site, we are verbatim if you're looking for influencer marketing support.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Nick, for having us. Same deal. Post on LinkedIn pretty regularly, Vin Metano. So feel free to connect with me there.
Cool. Fantastic. Well, thank you both. And if you're looking to learn more and connect with me, I'm also on LinkedIn. So feel free to shoot me a note and connect with me over there. Outside of that, I think that's it. Again, thank you everyone for joining. We'll send out the recording, all of that good stuff. And if you have any questions, reach out. But other than that, have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Vin and Bree.
Thank you. Bye.